Welcome to the Data Room, where we demystify go-to-market data for financially strategic executives. We'll explore case studies and deliver real-world guidance for finance and go-to-market teams to transform their data into a strategic asset. I'm Scott Stouffer, CEO of Scale Matters. Today's guest is the head of global private equity practice at Zuora, Mike Belkin. Mike, welcome to the Data Room.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, good to have you. I'm excited to hear some of your thoughts. Mike, I heard a PE firm reached out to you about building a partnership with Zuora, and you did some sort of comparative analysis on your customer data vis-a-vis their portfolio, convinced you the partnership was the right move. Tell us a little bit about how you go about doing that work when you have an opportunity to create one of these partnerships.
Yeah, so I actually started on the go-to-market side, on the sales side at Zuora 5 years ago. Had a background in private equity. Actually started my career at HIG Growth, so knew the PE space well. Was actually having some success, kind of expanding Zuora's customer relationships with PE-backed businesses through M&A. And so when this inbound lead actually came in from a private equity firm wanting to explore a partnership with Zuora, I kind of fielded the pitch, so to speak, worked with Zuora's Alliances organization, which was a newer part of our company that we were standing up, and figured out what could be a mutually beneficial partnership with this PE firm. Now, on the data side, it's really important to look at what is happening within your current customers in any given PE portfolio when you're trying to create a partnership. Like, what are the customers? What are the commercials that they have? How do you juxtapose that against an offer, or preferred vendor arrangement you might make available through a discount or something like that to the PE firm? And so understanding all of those things is paramount to setting up a successful partnership. And as I got more into this after this kind of beta pilot, partner of ours made several CFO introductions, which is our kind of main persona that we sell to at Zuora as a CFO office, quote to revenue solution. It became clear that this was like a huge channel of opportunity for us, and eventually evolved into a standalone program within Zuora's Alliances. We've got almost $100 million of revenue that's owned by private equity at this point, mapped across some of the largest tech buyout funds. So that 2.5 years ago was kind of how this all gets started at Zuora, and conveniently lined up with Silver Lake making their first investment in Zuora as well, and they've been a great partner along these lines too.
Do all of the partnerships that you have with PE firms take the same shape, or are some of them, kind of loose referral where others are mandated? Talk to us a little bit about the nature of these things.
Yeah, everyone's a little bit different, right? I mean, naturally, your own investors are going to be, the most motivated to help you. And so that's like the tier one, lowest hanging fruit, highest impact relationships. For Zuora, we mainly focus on the large tech buyout funds, where they're driving value creation strategy, and often, have SaaS companies where they're, transitioning to seat-based pricing and doing advanced, things where Zuora can make a difference in enabling that value creation. So sometimes it can be a looser MOU referral type relationships. Other times there can be like a formal, price book or guide that we share. Try to take the path of least resistance when possible, but sometimes, you need to work with the PE firm and create more of a bespoke program in order to kind of clear that bar and become a preferred vendor at the firm, and earn that right to start up a cadence and kind of dialogue around what's happening with existing customers in any given portfolio, and new logo opportunities that you might want their help pursuing.
When one of your PE partners acquires a new company, new portco, given that you said you mostly focus on large tech buyout funds, do they almost always have something in place from a quote to cash, quote to revenue perspective, something other than simply spreadsheets, or is there some greenfield there?
It totally varies from company to company, right? If you're looking at like the lower mid market, businesses often don't have a CPQ. They may be doing, homegrown billing or some combination of CRM and ERP and making it work with some manual things in the middle there. Our ICP comes into play when companies kind of are approaching that 100 million threshold. That's not a, hard and fast rule. But there's a certain maturity that companies go through when they're past that 100 million mark, when they're adding, consumption-based revenue streams, making some changes on that front, preparing for IPO, preparing for exit too, for that matter. So the complexity of kind of the go-to-market, how they sell, all impacts whether or not a private equity firm will make the decision to drive a transformation of a quote to revenue overhaul. I think there's a calculus that the value creation teams make when they look at, okay, we just bought this business, we've assessed their stack. How does that stack line up with where we want to take this company based on the pricing and packaging and go-to-market changes?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm seeing a lot in Zuora's ICP, 100 million plus B2B SaaS companies that have been taken private recently over the last few years, and that list is kind of growing, is a lot of these companies are pivoting to usage and consumption from a seat-based model, and that pivot becomes more challenging if you've got a legacy stack where you need to hard code these types of changes. And so we see a lot of that on the market where companies do things manually, and oftentimes it breaks or becomes a strain on growth for the business, let alone kind of efficiency for the finance org trying to kind of make sense and do revenue recognition and have proper ARR reporting on all these things.
That makes a ton of sense to me. I'm just imagining if the CFO, is it the CFO that's your sort of primary champion within these companies?
I would say for B2B SaaS, which is probably 75% of Zuora's business in private equity, it's the finance organization. So it's the CFO, it's the controller that appreciates, having an integrated, order to revenue, quote to revenue solution like Zuora. In B2C, it can be more of a product and IT type discussion. These aren't hard and fast, but that's generally what we see.
Okay. And the finance people in the B2B world, they are leveraging the platform to basically be the determiner of revenue recognition, among other things. Are they also leveraging it to kind of be the driver of SaaS metrics, net dollar retention, logo retention, all that type of stuff? Does that come into play?
Yes. And more we are getting asked by private equity firms like, hey, how do we get our ARR reporting in a certain way that mirrors kind of how we like our portcos to report out on these things? So that's a topic that's coming up more. And you can get a lot of that insights out of Zuora, and always striving to make that easier, more configurable. Because each PE firm is often a little bit different in how they like to see it. So finding the optimal balance of what you can push out of Zuora, what's available in native dashboards in the systems is important.
Do they use Zuora to help with their planning? Like, I'm thinking about this usage-based concept that you brought up. And obviously that it's a different model. It's a different pricing model. It therefore sort of dictates a different model of someone's whole go-to-market motion and how that builds up revenue. Are they able to leverage data that's within Zuora to help them build kind of the 2026 FY plan, or do you see that happening at this point?
Definitely are starting to see that happening. About half of our customers are monetizing some form of usage or consumption in Zuora today. We see that even higher for larger private equity owned companies. We see lots of changes across go-to-market and in the order to revenue process when a business looks to add a consumption revenue stream. From how you comp your sales reps, customer success, right? Driving that adoption changes a lot of things in the go-to-market design. And then, from a technology standpoint, your order to revenue process into revenue recognition and forecasting too for the business. So it really presents a lot of pressures and a lot of, private equity operators are working through what is kind of the best in class setup to administer this shift in our portcos as there's this move away from seat-based pricing to outcomes. And so, we've seen this at customers like Zendesk and Genesis as examples, kind of customer support space, early movers in making this shift. From a product standpoint at Zuora, we've really invested in being able to, intake, meter and rate the data, transform, and then price and package on it and have that, available in one kind of order to cash infrastructure. So it's traceable end to end is kind of the big bet that we're making and trying to make easier for companies because it affects so many different things.
Change management comes to mind when you describe this. Have you guys had to add services to help enable all of this with it, or do you partner with services companies and consulting companies? Because I know from my own, in fact, at my previous company, we actually implemented Zuora. We're going on 9 years ago, maybe at this point, and that was not an easy feat then. And this was a small company, and so I'm sure things have just evolved massively since then. But I'm thinking to really, get this right requires a lot of change management, process management within the portco that's going to, upgrade to Zuora, let's say. How do you guys deal with that?
It's a great question, and Zuora is a partner first, go to market. So Deloitte and PwC have Zuora practices. Regional players that are highly influential in private equity, like RSM, have Zuora practices. Connor Group, right? So they are often guiding the client, doing order to revenue assessments, helping run a process to select a vendor, right? And sometimes it's Zuora and a couple others that are in there, in a deal, and then they have Zuora practices to go out and implement it as well. We have a Zuora global services team, which has been, candidly shrinking over time, right? Like we've pushed more Zuora implementations out to system integrators, knowing that there's an opportunity for them to build a practice around it.
Yeah.
If you think about like the Deloittes and PwCs of the world, like Zuora can help a company make a transformation from a monetization standpoint, but not necessarily be beholden to like an ERP, cloud migration or transformation either. So there's some things that we kind of fit into in the GSI world that are pretty thematic, and then a lot of the regional partners too that are influential in the NetSuite ecosystem, trying to understand where are those situations where there's complexity, high volume, and scale, where Zuora provides differentiated value, and getting them to feature us and bring us in those situations, and driving incentives around that too.
Okay, so largely leveraging partners there.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So let's shift gears and talk about your role, your job, which I think is fascinating because, virtually all of us that sell any tech or services to PE-backed companies go, well, I have my go-to-market strategy. It's going to be use the PE firms as my channel. But nobody has a Mike Belkin on their staff, right? Or very few companies do. So in one regard, I'm jealous as I'm having this conversation with you. But talk to me about the role and how it is similar or different than a traditional go-to-market, BD type role. And let's start with just the concept of funnels, right? If you think about in a traditional direct sales, we're generating leads, we convert some of those into initial discovery meetings, and we put them into a opportunity in Salesforce or whatever CRM we're using, and we have 6 stages of opportunities, yada, yada, yada. You have a pipeline coverage number that, somebody tells you it needs to be 5x or whatever. Same stuff here, or do you deal with it differently?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say, even though there aren't a ton of people like me, out there. Like it is becoming more normalized at large, category leading SaaS companies
Yeah.
where there is portfolio operators focused on a given function, be it finance, go to market, IT cloud, or even AI. There are increasingly, folks like myself at companies like, NetSuite and Salesforce for many years, popping up at Workday and Flowcast and Ramp and you name it, right? Like there are a lot of these programs being built.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing to highlight. Now, to your question, how is it different than just being an AE or running a standard sales motion? Everything I think about is value creation and framing it in the interests of what, my stakeholder is at the private equity firm. And I think best practice here is, to try to align with that operator at the PE firm who stands to benefit from your technology in enabling value creation at the portco that they're working on, right? And so the ability to do that, making your solution easy to deploy and buy and reflect that value and share those stories, is more kind of what you're looking to unlock. And then it's a one-to-many motion, right? Once you have a kind of critical mass of happy referenceable customers in any given portfolio, and then kind of the flywheel starts to turn in that portfolio. So it's more kind of looking at things on a franchise or a portfolio base. Of course, in sales, you look at your franchise, your book of business, how do you expand it? In PE, sometimes companies get sold. There's nothing you can do about that, right? So be careful if you're going to design your comp plan around just like the total amount of PE owned ARR that you have, because you need to factor in companies that get sold. You could think about maybe controlled churn and account expansion. But again, like companies in your customers that you own are going to get bought by private equity, and then that's part of the motion too. So I'm constantly looking and monitoring through pitch book data, right, and kind of rev ops that I've set up, through private equity firms that are attached to the account records in Salesforce, and how I keep track of things, and down to the each AE's level of what of their strategic accounts are owned by private equity. What of their customers are owned by private equity? Where do we have relationships? Which of those relationships are actionable?
So that's kind of the research front end, looking for targets to go after. What about when somebody takes the bait, right? Is it a repeatable process within all of them, or are they all bespoke because of the way they're organized? I know in my experience, and they're not all different, but there's probably 3 or 4 different models with how they do value creation and kind of the level of authority they have and stuff like that. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that affects the motions you would have to put into play
Yeah,
to get that partner locked in.
I don't think there's a one size fits all answer for this, right? Because every solution is a little bit different in kind of how it's used in any given portfolio, right? Like NetSuite or Salesforce or Zuora or Gong, right? Like everyone's a little bit different in how they attach, where, in the investment life cycle their solution is sold, right? So that's something we think about, like in that kind of 6 months into the hold time, is often like when a company has gotten their CRM in order and can look at like billing, and ERP, right? So those are all really, really important things to take into consideration.
Is there a go-to title within the PE firm that you're looking for?
Because Zuora is a solution where we know, if the finance team is involved in the deal, we win at a higher rate, and that's coming out of our ICP analysis. I'm trying to engage with the most senior operator within the office of the CFO, if the private equity firm has a CFO office. Not everyone does, right? And sometimes someone might be kind of finance transformation or mix. Like not every PE firm is organized in the same way, with kind of functional operators in different areas. So that's And some PE firms have playbooks, right? Where they only buy B2B SaaS companies, and those B2B SaaS companies run on certain solutions. So there's nuances there which may affect, how well or not, your solution aligns to that PE firm strategy. And I think there's again, like, not a one size fits all for where any given company fits in with any given PE firm. The onus is on, folks like me and the other PE leaders to kind of attach and highlight how your solution, unlocks that value creation, and aligns with what the operators are trying to drive for their portcos.
Putting aside Silver Lake, where there was maybe a slightly biased impetus, what's the typical time that it's taking you from first conversation to first referral?
It's usually a quarter, I would say. Like, you kind of get it going, you have your cadence, you start, highlighting to them what are the accounts that might be looking at Zuora, might have open opportunities, what are they trying to solve, and almost try to, like, coach them or teach them into the ICP signals that they should be looking for, so that, when a company is struggling on CPQ, or when a company can't adjust their pricing and packaging because, they're on homegrown billing, right? Like, call me, or let's have a partner come in and talk to them, and kind of train them to look for those signals. And then also, as you set up your cadence with the PE firm and the operators, like, going into those meetings, highlighting a certain set of companies and why you are highlighting them. And I think once you get that going and then engage on an opportunity, and hopefully that goes well, you kind of set up the flywheel then.
I assume the whole point of doing this and getting to the flywheel is the presumption that you actually can get lower cost acquisition that way. Is that true?
100%. And then also, there's an element of, like, preventing churn, right? So being aware of, not every PE relationship is great. So, like, we have our expansion team. And so, like, looking at when those customer renewal dates are and making sure they're aware of that. But the most valuable part of this motion, I would argue, and I think most would too, is, like, getting those PE introductions to senior leaders at the portcos that are actionable, are going to be investing in technology to drive aggressive growth targets, right? And know that they're being introduced to someone who's a preferred vendor, and you kind of get right into it and have an accelerated sales cycle. So instead of, going through the Zuora website and talking to, like, a business development associate, you can get right to the right person in an efficient discussion, because the PE firm knows what my technology does, and it knows what the ICP is and what the portco's problem is, and they can kind of bring that together in harmony is what good looks like.
The meeting always happens, right? So you get that intro. The meeting always happens. Generally happens pretty soon, and everyone seems to just be willing to be more transparent. So you quickly get to, is there a fit or not? So I get that completely. You mentioned ICP, and you mentioned that your target PE partners are large tech buyout firms. I assume you arrived at that because those are the people that buy the companies that are the ICP for your platform, correct?
That's right. As I got more into this and looked at other large PE firms and kind of worked backwards from where there was a cluster of Zuora customers that were owned by these large PE firms, and then assessing their portfolios, it became clear that there was a group of call it a dozen. There's about 25 or so that I track closely, but like a dozen that had, 5 or more Zuora customers, right? And there were opportunities in play. And so there has to be that critical mass, where there's enough customer ACV. And sometimes the PE firm will say, like, look, you need at least 5 million of ARR in our portfolio for this to be worth the time to manage a relationship.
Okay.
And so that's like a really important thing for anyone thinking about starting up this motion at their company with PE, at least, is, you're not really going to be taken seriously until you have like at least 2 or 3 customers that are, happy, successful, referenceable. And then, other firms may even have larger thresholds for spend or certain
Yeah.
things they want to see before they would, consider you as a preferred vendor.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, any other ICP profiles, attributes that you think of around your target PE? I mean, you said there's 25, maybe a dozen, but things like the structure of value creation. Are you able to figure that out in advance of talking to them, and that that if they're structured this way or this other way, that it's more likely to be a success for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think genuinely growth oriented, tech focused investors is generally where we play better, and that's part of the nature of Zuora's customer base. Like our customers are higher growth, generally speaking, more disruptive. We're a more expensive solution, so just the nature of that creates situations where that's our ICP in PE owned. And if it's like a hairy struggling PE owned company, like you're probably not going to need Zuora. So figuring out like where and I actually think like PE firms that are more patient with longer hold times can be better for Zora's ICP too. If I won't name the firm, but there's one firm that has like tries to target 3-year hold times and albeit lower middle market. Sometimes a quote to cash transformation doesn't fit into that window.
Yeah,
If they,
yeah. I mean, it fits in within 3 years, but sometimes barely.
right. But like sometimes,
But you don't get the benefit from it in time.
but then you're like merging a couple companies together, and so this gets pushed out, and one thing leads to another, and then yeah. So all that is to say, each PE firm's strategy is a little bit different, right? But um it's finding those nuances. It's understanding the portfolios, understanding, how the success of your customers in the portfolios, right, makes a big difference too. Because it could be 5 customers, and if 4 of them are really happy, great. But if 3 of them are unhappy, that you might not have anything with that PE firm then.
Yeah, yeah, good point. You mentioned earlier, I think I heard you say around that 6-month time post investment is a common point where they say now it's time to look at this whole quote to cash thing. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I mean that's a generalization. If it's a carve out, it becomes more urgent, right? Because if it's a carve out, you'll have a TSA and a certain amount of time to hang on to the old systems, but then like you need CRM, billing, and ERP stood up so you can invoice and collect, right?
Okay.
So carve outs are interesting deals, and there've been a few of those recently, where it kind of necessitates a reason to move fast and get it done. During those first 100 days of the investment life cycle, everything gets assessed, that value creation plan gets put in place. There's a plan to drive growth. There may be quote to revenue systems challenges that yield a disconnect to that growth plan. And if that's the case, then the question becomes, well, what are our options, right? Like, can we home grow, build this, continue to grow in this way? What's it going to cost for us to do that? What is the risk with that? And we will quantify all of this in partnership with the PE firm and as part of like our value engineering kind of business case, workshops, which is a big part of how we engage strategically to try to highlight ultimately like, look, if you're going to make this investment in Zuora, here's the EBITDA impact that you can expect to get. We're going to unlock this type of revenue growth, this much more efficiently, and quantify all of that out.
So are they bringing you in during like that first 100 days and asking you to sort of assess the fit between the current quote to cash and the growth plans, or are they leveraging consultants to do that? Because I mean, I'm thinking, while most of these PE firms do have some technical people, I'm thinking they don't populate their value creation groups with quote to cash experts necessarily. And so who's doing that that gap analysis, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's really a thriving, ecosystem of mid-market services firms. Some of them are Zuora partners, like the ones I've talked about earlier. I mean, at the large end, if we're talking about, big companies, PwC and Deloitte, the mid-market, you've got the CFO advisory firms like the Accordions and Westman Rose of the world, which are highly influential. The regional partners like RSM and Connor Group too. Are popping up. So there's a whole thriving ecosystem of kind of commercial excellence to NetSuite to quote to cash. And the private equity firms, of course, have their own relationships with these vendors that they'll bring in as well. And so you kind of work the ecosystem. I wouldn't say they're necessarily bringing in Zuora right off the bat in the first 100 days every time. I mean, sometimes it does happen when they know it's a, they've kind of identified that it's a company that has the traits, large technology business, high transaction volumes that kind of fit the Zuora ICP. It has happened, but usually they'll bring in a partner to drive some sort of assessment for the company. And depending on the size of the team, sometimes the team might be able to lead if you've got a capable executive in there who's driven a transformation before. So I think those things are all a little bit situational based on the company, based on how the PE firm likes to do it. Yeah.
Interesting. Hey, Mike, this has been a great conversation. I'm tapped out of questions, but I find the topic to be very interesting. I really do think PE as a channel is an important thing that many companies should be considering. And of course, the more people that consider it, the harder it will be to establish that. So nice to see you guys are having some success, and I appreciate you sharing some of your wisdom with us.
Yeah, you got it, Scott. And look, the kind of takeaway is like private equity is buying more SaaS. The SaaS that they own is more reliant upon SaaS to grow and operate efficiently. And because of that, and as partner ecosystems becomes more entrenched as a normalized go-to-market function, it's all kind of naturally evolved, and we've gotten to this point where whether it's sales teams or partner teams or both have a PE focus and awareness that they're using to attach to value creation initiatives and just be a little bit more strategic about how they sell in these ways.
Yeah, well, I lied. I do have one more question because you just prompted it in my thinking. So I recently saw one of your posts on LinkedIn, and it looked like you were speaking at some partner catalyst group or a catalyst summit or something like that. What are the communities that you're tapping into that have like-minded folks like you? Granted, there's not a lot of these people with these jobs, but are there any communities that you're participating in to share war stories and tips and best practices?
Yeah, so that was at a partnership leaders conference. So partnership leaders is a community of ecosystem partnership leaders. There isn't much yet on private equity specific, kind of manage some informal communities and things like that around that, but maybe something in the future that we might have to make a little bit more formal, because it is becoming more a normalized thing in many go-to-market teams.
Interesting. Cool. Mike, thanks again. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Make no mistake, good data matters for driving efficient growth and valuations. Follow me on LinkedIn, where I'm sharing insights from CFOs, investors, and strategic go-to-market execs. Thanks for listening to The Data Room.